Welcome to the Big Change the Film interview series, and my name is Jason Cohen. I personally have lost over 120 pounds, and every week I chat with inspiring individuals who've also lost significant amounts of weight, hear their story, and pass along some of that inspiration to others. Including today's guest and myself, the total pounds lost is now up to 12,432 pounds. If you've been enjoying the interview series, there's a couple ways that you can help support what I'm doing. Number one is to rate us on iTunes. It's easy, it's free, and that just helps others to see what I'm up to and helps others to find out about these other inspiring stories. The second way to help support what I'm doing is to buy a t-shirt through our website. I've got a t-shirt here. It is the same one you'll see on the site. It says impossible upside down and then possible. And then on the back it says Big Change the Film. I've also got stickers, which if you order a t-shirt, I can make sure to include it. 100% of the profits from the t-shirt sales go directly back into the interview series and in the film. I don't keep any of that myself. It's just to help support what I'm doing and offset some of the costs. This week's guest is Doug Schmidt, who lives in Rochester, New York. Doug said he was previously a bit of a foodie. He would eat wheels of brie as an appetizer, and later in life, Doug ended up having some heart issues. He ended up having a heart attack. He had to have a stent put in his widowmaker, which he told me only 10% of people actually survive. He's since completely changed his diet. He ran his first marathon. All over the age of 50, he's also lost 60 pounds, and he was even named PETA's sexiest vegan over 50. We have a fantastic conversation about his journey. Thanks so much for watching, for listening, and I hope you have a great week. I'm here with Doug Schmidt. We got connected. I actually reached out to him after seeing his story on Forks Over Knives. Later to realize we have a lot of mutual friends, and he's got a great story, lost a bit of weight. It sounds like he's lucky to be alive. And Doug, first off, thanks for taking the time to chat with me. And maybe we could just start off with where you live and a little bit about yourself.
Well, I live in Rochester, New York, just off the Thruway, in a little town called Brighton.
How much weight have you lost? I should
I
ask
lost
that.
60 pounds. I used to weigh 225 and just called it my typical middle-age spread, that most men my age had. I wasn't, in my view, any obese or overweight. I was just a typical standard American.
Got you. And then, had you been heavy for a while? Was it something that you found later in life, or how did things kind of happen with that?
Well, nobody, even the people who knew me would say, oh, you're not that heavy, because I hid it well. I carried it all over my frame. It wasn't like I really stood out as being severely overweight. But it came on gradually. I was semi-active for what I think most people were. As my sons were growing, I was hiking with them in Boy Scout camps and canoeing and mountain climbing and stuff. So I was active. I just wasn't a lightweight like I am now. And, now after I've lost the weight, I weigh what I did in high school and feeling better than I did when I was in my 20s.
Wow. And then, did that weight come on kind of gradually, a couple pounds every year, every other year kind of thing?
What was interesting is I could see it come on and go off, come on and go off, almost seasonally. It was like I put on my winter weight, but each year that winter weight stuck around longer. I may have gained 10 pounds over the winter and lost 5 and then gained another 10 the next year. So it was always a little bit bigger. And really didn't think much about it until I had a heart attack.
Yeah, that'll do it. That'll cause you to think, at least hopefully. Well, what did food look like for you? Those insidious 5 pounds or so a year. What were the major contributors to that as far as food goes, looking back now?
Well, in my old occupation, I used to be bakery trainer for a supermarket chain up here. So literally, I've been baking all my life. I can bake anything from croissants to wedding cakes. And that was a big part of my meals. On the weekends, I'd bake breads and cookies and cakes and pies and things. And when I went out to eat, I had those things. I consider myself a foodie by nature, and my wife as well. So this standard thing would be some form of meat, maybe a side of some form of mashed potatoes, maybe a salad, and maybe an appetizer of cheese and crackers. And that was day in, day out pretty much, or lots of pasta. When I look now, it's like, where were the vegetables in my diet? And they really weren't there.
Well, yeah, I think I saw in the article you said you would eat wheels of brie as an appetizer.
We did. I mean, we could, well, especially if even back then I was cooking a lot of our food. So, that became sort of a routine or a ritual. You a glass of wine, some cheese and crackers while you're preparing the meal. And so that would just extend the eating experience. And then you'd sit down for the meal, have another couple glasses of wine along with the meal. And before you've consumed a lot of calories.
Yeah, you get to a point where you've almost consumed a meal or two or three's worth of calories before you get to the meal even.
Right.
I was certainly guilty of that. And then, did you ever do anything to try and stave it off or try and, diet or anything?
There were times that I went to lose weight, but I was never a big dieter. I did Weight Watchers for a little bit, lost, maybe 15, 20 pounds. But I'm not that kind of social guy that wants to be checked in, adhering to somebody else's system, plan, formula, or whatever. So that didn't last long. I tried to lose whatever weight I did by either portion control or maybe upping my exercise a little bit. But even with that, it wasn't purposeful exercise. It's not like I took on running to lose weight. Actually, my running that I've started didn't happen until I lost all the weight. My form of exercise would be, okay, I'm going to go on a hike today. That was my exercise. Or I'm going to work in the yard, with wheelbarrows of mulch or something. That was my exercise. So I really didn't work at it. Anyways, I would, and it was almost more, I didn't want to get up over a size 38 pant. That was my limit. So I think I sort of self-regulated to keep myself in there. But those size 38 pants were getting tighter and tighter. So.
Yeah, it's always that dreaded size up. It's like, for some reason, 38 becomes normal and then 40 becomes normal. But then you're like, oh, no, I have to go to 42. And you're like, how did I get to 42 in the first place?
Well, I went to Brooks Brothers for a pair of dress pants. And the guy goes, well, what size are you? And I said, 36. And he goes, okay, I'll go get you a 38. What? And he goes, well, our pants are true to size. Most American manufacturers have changed the actual size. So a 36 is not a 36. A 36 is a 38. And that was surprising. I knew they did that kind of stuff with women's clothes, but you don't think of it with guys' clothes. And sure enough, that's what all the factories do.
Wow. And then, I know you, and we'll obviously get into it, you had a bit of a health event, but previous to that, how was your health? Were you on any meds? Do you have anything about your weight or any physical medical stuff going on that prevented you from doing anything or affected your quality of life?
No. Well, in my early 40s, I had 3 ruptured discs that they operated on, had a laminectomy, and they fixed that. That was really the only health event before the major one. I was never diagnosed with high cholesterol, never diagnosed with high blood pressure, wasn't on any medications. So, when I did have the heart attack, it came as sort of a surprise, especially I was 49 at the time.
Wow. So Memorial Day 2008 is the date of the heart attack. Take me through that. What happened?
Well, I was literally, it was late morning, I think. I was just walking in the yard, not doing anything, just walking with the dog in the yard. And I got a tightness between my shoulder blades. And I had gotten tightness like that over the years, sometimes when I'm stressed, sometimes, raking too many leaves or whatever, just that tightness, and you roll your shoulders and you hope it would go away. Well, this time it didn't go away, and there was tightness in my chest. Still didn't think anything of it, but then I got nausea and a little lightheadedness, and I laid down in the grass, caught my breath, let it subside, and I figure, well, I don't know what that was, but I'll get up and start walking again, and I did, and it took me right back to the ground. So that still wasn't enough. I went in the house, I Googled chest pain, back pain, nausea. And on my Google feed, it came up, heart attack, heart attack, heart attack, heart attack. And I go, I guess I better call my doctor. So I called my doctor. And at this time, I was actually dating my now wife in Ithaca, New York. So I wasn't even in my hometown to go see my doctor. And he goes, go to emergency right away. So what he meant was call the 911, get an ambulance, and go to emergency. But I went over and asked my now wife, I said, could you take me to the hospital? And she's looking at me like, did you cut yourself? Are you bleeding? No, I just talked to my doctor. I'm not feeling well. Take me in. So we went in, and Ithaca Hospital is a small hospital. And I told them what was going on, and I felt pretty good at this time. And they brought me in, put me in a bed, hooked me up to all different monitors, and I'm chit-chatting away with the nurse when all the staff comes running in. And they're saying, we have to get you out of here. I go, what do you mean you have to get me out of here? You're having a heart attack. And they said, where do you want to go? Sarah, Pennsylvania, or Syracuse, New York? And I thought, Sarah, Pennsylvania? Why Sarah, Pennsylvania? I don't know Sarah, Pennsylvania. I'll go to Syracuse. Little did I know Sarah, Pennsylvania is one of the leading heart hospitals. It's probably where I should have gone. I wish they would have told me. So they rushed me by ambulance up to Syracuse, and 45 minutes after I got in the hospital, I came out with a new stent, a piece of hardware in my lower anterior descending artery. The good old Widowmaker.
Yeah. Well, number one, it sounds like you had a really long heart attack, because I'm thinking from the time that you first decided to lie down on the ground to the time that you got to the hospital and then they told you you're having a heart attack, like that's an extended amount of time.
It is. My guess is it was, whether it was multiple little ones or whether, and even when they said in the hospital you're having a heart attack, I didn't feel like anything like I did when I was in the yard. And that weekend, their cardiac staff wasn't on call, so they had no staff to take care of me there. That's why they had to send me to these other hospitals. When I did talk to the cardiologist that put the stent in afterwards, he goes, you were lucky. He said, you had major blockages in your Widowmaker. Typically, we detect a certain enzyme in the blood to determine how much of a heart attack you had. We don't detect any of that enzyme. So technically, you didn't have a heart attack, but technically, you did have a heart attack. And so it's like, okay, what do you call it? Well, I think it was definitely a warning shot across the bow to say, Doug, it's that wake up call that you need. And so, but even with that, especially at 49, you still have some of that invincibility of being in your 20s. Well, it can't be me. I'm active. I'm healthier than some of these other people. And so there was some denial there, but there was also I remember that feeling the day after of sort of like, this is a second shot, a second lease on life. And so it got me looking at my health a little differently.
Yeah, and I know for some people they may be familiar either hearing about it or maybe having an experience, somebody close to themselves. But for the type of heart attack you had, 90% of the people who have it don't make it. Yeah,
and so I was one of the lucky 10%. And I'm also a chicken by nature, and I don't want to get my chest cracked open. And so that also led me down the path. It's one thing to go in through my veins and pop a little sleeve in my arteries. It's another thing to cut me open and have an incision down my chest. So that led me to search out some help.
So what did what new knowledge, or what was next? Did you go on meds? Did they say change your diet? What ensued?
Well, the interesting thing is I did go to cardiac rehab. They put me on a whole battery of meds, statins and beta blockers and stuff, and things to help let my body take in the stent without to help accept it. And the nutritionist they had me talk to, basically she towed the American Heart Association line of what I could and couldn't have. And actually, some of that I already wasn't having. I wasn't having a lot of red meat. I was eating chicken. I was eating fish. Not so much whole grain stuff, but I had basically gotten rid of fried food for the most part. So I thought I was not doing that bad compared to the American Heart Association diet. Did start doing my own research because I figured all these medications were for somebody in their 70s or 60s at least. And what are the long-term effects for somebody in my 40s? So I looked up, found Dr. Ornish's books, and I found Dr. Esselstyn's. And I looked at Dr. Esselstyn's, read his book, and sort of said, well, the Heart Association says I can have all this. Esselstyn says I can't have any of this. Moderation is the key. And so I started eating the American Heart Association diet. And at this point, my wife and I, we moved to a small 8-acre farm. And we started trying to grow as much of our own food as possible. And so we thought we were doing better. We had our own chickens we had just for eggs. And we figured, well, the American Heart Association says I can have 4 eggs a week. I'm only having 2 on Sunday with my omelet. So, I figured I'm doing better right off the bat, and I'm only having chicken, and fish. But a year later, one of the last days of work I'm a teacher. I was working in school. I just wasn't feeling right. And I went to the nurse, and she took my vitals, and she said, something's not right. So they called an ambulance, rushed me to the hospital again. And luckily, it was a research hospital, University of Rochester. And they went in, and they said, well, you have some blockages that are about 60%. Let's just wait and see. You probably had a clot or a blockage that passed. Well, that was not real reassuring. So obviously, the diet I was on wasn't doing good enough. And that's when we started transitioning to more of a plant-based diet. It still wasn't overnight. Just the learning curve of trying to make those transitions took us a couple years. But we managed between our changes and a great general practitioner doctor who worked with me, we were able to do it and get off my medications. And that's where I am today.
Wow. Well, I want to backtrack a little bit. One thing that you said in the article that I thought was interesting was I thought it would be too extreme to give up all the food I enjoyed. I would just cut back on the meat, and that would be good enough. And you also say, altering eating habits ingrained from birth is one of the hardest things to do. So obviously there was a part in time where, do you think that you just, I hate to say that the Widowmaker wasn't enough to scare you into, I'll be 100% perfect or whatever, but where were you at mentally in those places where you were kind of willing to halfway do it or roll the dice?
That's an interesting question in the fact that it all along the line, my wife, Sherry, she took the Cornell plant-based nutrition course. So she'd find something out and she'd say, you're not supposed to have oil. Whoa, man, I've given up this. Now I can't have oil. So the new information would come in and, okay, we'll drop the oil. Once you learn something, you can't unlearn it. And I think that's what it was. It was not so much I in some ways, I don't think I read things thoroughly. I flipped through the Esselstyn book. I wasn't really listening to what he was saying. I wasn't those extreme heart patients that he talks about that were on death's door. My door was still open, but it didn't slam shut on me. So I, I think part of my, like I think a lot of us, that doesn't pertain to me, that pertains to somebody else. But as my wife and I have talked with others about this, and they ask questions and stuff, and some people say, it didn't work for me. And we say, 100% participation yields 100% results. If you only do 75%, you don't get 100% results. You don't even get 75% results. So, as we were going through this, my general practitioner, initially he started meeting with me every 3 months, and he'd take blood work. That's all he did with me, take my blood work. And he could tell from my blood work if I was doing what I said I was doing. And initially, I didn't know the role that statins played in my diet, or not diet, in my health. I thought, okay, I'm on statins, that's lowering my cholesterol, that should be basically good enough. My good cholesterol isn't high enough, that's basically why they have me on it. My total cholesterol isn't that bad, it's under 200. Well, what happened is I was statin sensitive. So the first statin they put me on caused plantar fasciitis. The second one they put me on caused my toes to splay like somebody was stretching them apart. It hurt. And the third one, which was Crestor, caused generalized muscle weakness throughout my body. I was walking up and down stairs with a hiking pole, couldn't get out of the car without pulling myself out of the car. I felt like I was 80, not 40 or in my early 50s. And so I went to my doctor, and he says, it's the statins, Doug. You're statin sensitive. They say about 10% of the population has it, but he believed that it was more. And we have two choices. We can put you on another statin, or we can do it all through diet. And that's where the rubber really met the road. That's where it all fell to me. And that's what I had been talking with my doctor. What do I have to do to get off these meds? Well, you have to take care of yourself. And that's when we went full on Esselstyn, dropped the oil, started eating our leafy greens, at every meal and more. And that's when the weight all started dropping off. I mean, it literally just started shedding. I didn't have to do any exercise. It just went away.
So your weight loss really, in a way, was almost accidental or a byproduct. It was not intentional.
No, it just started happening. And it got, initially when I started, I figured, well, if I got to 180, that's a healthy weight, and all my numbers and everything would come in line. Well, I hit 180 and saw that, hey, I still have a little bit around the middle I can lose. And, reading like Dr. McDougall's work and stuff, people talk that you'll find your set point. And when you find that set point on the plant-based diet, that's where you will hover. And sure enough, that's what has happened. When I started losing more, getting down to the 165, when I was 175 and 170, people at work, even some people who are plant-based, were saying, Doug, you're getting a little too thin. And, I had to tell them, I go, actually, we as Americans have a misperception of what is healthy, because everybody else looks like everybody else in a certain weight, a certain fullness in their face and stuff. They consider that healthy. When they see someone skinny, they're not healthy, especially somebody who was heavier and has lost that weight. I had one person say, what happens if you get sick? You need that extra weight, and it's like, well, no, that extra weight is probably why those people got sick. So you're healthy, and research has shown if you're lighter, you do live longer and are healthier. So,
wow. And then in my mind, you kind of had two different scares, opportunities, whatever you want to call them, your first heart attack and then getting the news of the blockage again. What did you do differently the second time to generate, the focus needed to really dial in on the diet, to really dial in on getting off the meds? Like, what was, in retrospect, what was different about that second round?
I think the second round was, okay, whatever you thought you were doing wasn't working. The American Heart Association is wrong. And just reading more of all the plant-based docs, whether it be Greger, whether it be Campbell, whether it be McDougall, Esselstyn, all of them, and it just started ringing home. And when you see the same evidence repeated over and over and over again from all these different people saying the same exact thing, it's not a fad diet. It's not, it's proven research and science. You can't deny it. Now, the hard part, eating that way, was changing those habits. And like I say, that Americans, they don't know what to do with vegetables. It's always been a side. It's always been either fried, boiled, baked, or roasted, and that's it. So, to have just a meal of veggies, how do you do that? And we forget that we don't look to other cultures like stir fries. There's an example. Rice and beans, there's an example. And so tapping into those other cultures helped us gain more comfort in preparing the meals. The other thing was getting more comfortable with those meals. It expanded our palates. Like I said, we're foodies by nature. So it became sort of a challenge. Okay, how can I make this without this? And boy, this is pretty good. And even though it doesn't have the oil or the eggs or the butter. And so that became sort of a challenge. I can do that. When I was a baker, I used to make this French almond pear tart, with a full butter crust and heavy cream. And it was just this rich, decadent thing. Well, I would make it every year for the holidays. And so one year I decided, okay, how can I make this without eggs, which the eggs are in the filling, the butter is in the crust. And I made a version of it that it was a nut crust tart. It's still not low fat in the fact of all those nuts, but it was definitely a healthier version. I got to have my sweet treat once a year, and I felt accomplished and satisfied. I can eat healthy and still enjoy some of those decadent treats that I used to have and used to make.
Yeah, I love the fact that you talked about in the article that you started looking at other cultures that use more veggies for inspiration. And another thing that I thought was good was that you and I'm curious if you still do this, that every week your aim is to try a new recipe. If
I have an addiction now, I've dropped a lot of my sugar addiction, my butter addiction, my cream and my coffee addiction. But I have an addiction to cookbooks that I inherited from my mother. So I actually had to get rid of a lot of I had a professional library of pastry books and things. And basically, I've gotten rid of almost all those because I'm not going to make anything in there anymore. But what's taken its place are a lot of cutting edge cookbooks on either vegan recipes, vegetarian and plant-based, because even some of the plant-based, the vegetarian books have ideas, flavors that I can draw from to create something new and different. A lot of cookbooks, and we probably every week we try one or two new recipes just to see what we like and keep things running. They say typically the average person goes through about 15 recipes that they just keep cycling over and over and over again. And we have more than that, but we eat well enough.
Okay, so just because I'm curious, 2 questions. Number 1 is, give me the last 1 to 3 weeks new recipes just to get an idea.
I made a penne carbonara recipe that has no bacon and all that, and with a cashew bechamel sauce. because right now I'm taking the Ruby plant-based professional course, and that was one of the recipes in the course, and I go, that sounds good. So I did that, and they also had a simple recipe for just roasting cauliflower that just used lemon juice, just a little bit of oil, literally just drops of oil, garlic, and salt and pepper. And you mix that all up, you toss the cauliflower, you roast it, and it was amazing how it tasted. And it also told me, because typically I don't use oil, but for the course I had to do the recipe, and so I sampled it, and I was amazed, because most restaurants you go to, things are dripping in oil. And this, you couldn't even tell there was oil on it. It was just almost like a carrier that carried some of the flavors. What popped out was the garlic, the salt, the pepper, and the lemon juice. But you didn't taste the oil. And it was just like the perfect dish. So simply prepared, but perfect. Last night I made baked falafel and sweet potato wraps with nice tahini sauce. So
I got to make it up. I got to make it up there. This is all sounding delicious. And then, I know it sounds like you've had an incredible amount of training and whatnot, but I know for a lot of people, the food is something that's just tough. Finding resources, finding also, sometimes you try one or two recipes from an unknown source and then it turns out terrible. And then, you kind of swear off like, well, I'm never trying that again. What are some basic cookbooks or recipe books that you recommend to people these days that, who are trying to kind of, make the transition or incorporate more of this kind of food? What are your go-tos there?
Well, I'm a health coordinator for our school district. So we have actually a lending library of plant-based books that I lend out. Some are nutrition books like the China study and things. But we have Olive Rip's books, so we have the Engine 2 7-Day Rescue, what's great about that book, they're quick, easy recipes. Some of them literally are opening a can of beans, putting it on a bed of rice. And some great sauces and combinations there. They really simplify the plant-based cooking for the novice. If people are willing to cook a little bit more, we like Plant Pure Nation's cookbook because Kim Campbell has a wonderful knack of really getting flavor profiles to things to comfort food that you can remember. Like her mac and cheese is a great mac and cheese recipe. It's, of course, mac and no cheese. But it answers that sort of home cooking comfort food. So those are two books that we recommend all the time to people. Also, the Prevent and Reverse Heart Disease book, some great recipes in there that we like to use. For people that want to cook a little bit more, the Whole Thug Kitchen series, I use that sometimes for those plant curious people. They aren't quite there, and they need sort of a little chuckle and a laugh, and they start eating some of those recipes, and it sort of brings them into the fold. So
yeah, those are all great recommendations. Back to yourself. You're off of all meds now, is that right?
Everything. The last one was a daily aspirin, and I was in between doctors. We had moved from around Ithaca, New York, up to Rochester, so we were between doctors, and I didn't have a doctor to ask. I found this article on if you're on a plant-based diet and you're on a daily aspirin, you're more susceptible to stroke. That didn't sound good. So I actually put an email out to Dr. Esselstyn because they always say, hey, just write to these guys, they'll get back to you. And sure enough, his assistant got back to me and says, the doctor would like to talk to you. Can I have your phone number? Sure enough, the next day he called me. Hi, this is Dr. Esselstyn. I hear you have a question for me. And I told him, and he goes, yep, you're more susceptible. If you've been eating, like you say you've been eating, a plant-based diet, and on the Esselstyn protocol especially, you're more susceptible to stroke, stomach ulcers, and macular degeneration. He goes, if I were you, I'd stop that daily aspirin. I go, I can just stop it cold turkey like that? He goes, do you want stroke? Do you want stomach ulcers? Do you want macular degeneration? So I stopped the aspirin. That was the last thing I was on, and my old doctor had kept me on that because that was his sort of insurance. Because doctors get rated on, if you're a heart patient, you should be on this drug, this drug, this drug, this drug. And I wasn't on any of those. So I think he used that as, well, at least he's on a daily aspirin. So that was the last thing, and that was, I think, almost 4 years ago now.
And it sounds to me like you had a pretty good idea of your numbers. You knew you had some blockage. Where are you at with that? Have you gone back? Have you had, your blockages rechecked? And then, cholesterol, things like that. Have you, do you kind of have a way of comparing where you are today on that stuff to where you were before?
I have my blood work checked about twice a year. Once through our school district, we get a free biometric screening. And the second at my doctor every year, where there is a full workup with, inflammation factors and blood sugar and full cholesterol workup. Plus I have them check my vitamin B12 and vitamin D and see where that is. And last time my total cholesterol was 123. No problems anywhere across the board. All my numbers were normal. So it's like, I feel like I won the lottery there, because based on the Framingham heart study, if you're below 150, they basically say you're heart attack proof. So, and I really don't live day to day worrying, is something going to get me? I figure I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm eating the way I'm supposed to do. All my blood work numbers are there. I wish we could go in and check everything again, but that's sort of invasive procedure. I guess there's some new procedures coming out that they could scan and check, but typically you have to have a problem, and if I'm not experiencing problem, the insurance won't pay for those things. But I also take a look at, here I ran my first marathon last year at age 58. And I have to say, if I can run the marathon in the hot weather that we had without any problems, that's also a pretty good indication that things are working pretty well in me. And, I do check my heart rate daily. My resting heart rate is typically about 54. There's no medical concerns,
Yeah, and just to contrast that to like what the normal is for somebody who had the heart attack that you had, what is the typical outlook for a person? If you would have done nothing to change your diet, those kinds of things, like what was the typical what were they saying you would have potentially, because we're at 10 years now, right?
Yeah.
For somebody who has that at your age, what would the future have looked like otherwise?
If I didn't change anything, I think basically what people would have said, or doctors or medical people, within 5 years, I would have been back in the hospital with some other event, whether bypass or more stents. And that's proven out with so many different people. I have a friend, an older friend. He has over 20 stents in his heart. He has some stents upon stents because the stents closed. And he found plant-based after the 19th stent. He goes, if I would have found plant-based nutrition after the first stent, I wouldn't have put my doctor's kids through college. And he just had a couple more put in because he's a single guy and he struggles learning to eat this way and falls off the wagon every once in a while. I think I can definitely say that without a doubt, if I didn't change anything, I would have had those other blockages blocked and I would have had to go back in. I had a friend who, once I had a heart attack and I was on the statins, they said, Doug, you can eat anything you want. You're on the statins. And that is such an American misconception that those pills are going to cure you. And they don't. They just manage the symptoms. And there was some meme somewhere, and it was basically that prescription meds don't cure chronic disease. They just manage the symptoms. And when you think about that, yeah, they're just managing the symptoms till you get worse and worse, till you need more surgery, more medical problems that even the medicine can't take care of it anymore.
Yeah, and I think that when in the article, you mentioned that your doctor at the time told you you would be on statins for the rest of your life. Is that right?
My cardiologist, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, wow. So it sounds like you're super involved in your community, with health, wellness, plant-based stuff. We were kind of talked briefly about a 10-day Jumpstart Your Health program that you're involved with. Can you kind of tell me about that? Maybe also tell me how that came about, maybe for somebody who's interested in trying to do similar stuff in their community?
Well, 3 years ago, when I became health and wellness coordinator of my district, I had just seen Plant Pure Nation. We liked the idea of the Plant Pure Jumpstart, and we were in a consortium of school districts that are in the same health plan, and we have a certain amount of money that we can use for health initiatives. And I convinced them to help support the 10-day Plant Pure Jumpstart by paying for half the cost of food for the Plant Pure Jumpstart. And everybody got the Plant Pure Nation cookbook. That year we had 31 people participate. It was a pretty good success. The next year we did it again, but that year we couldn't afford the food. But that year we changed it up a little bit, and we did, I think it was, at that time, it was the Engine 2 7-Day Rescue. We used his book, and we had 63 people participate, so we doubled our numbers. Well, the gentleman who oversees all our districts said, Doug, and this was this past year, he goes, would you consider doing it for the 35 school districts, plus a community college in the area, for the staff? And I said, sure. And we thought we'd get 400 or 500 people. But the response was so overwhelming, we got over 1,300 people to participate in this 10-day Jumpstart Your Health, and we used the Engine 2 7-Day Rescue cookbook. And it was just amazing. We have a Facebook group that 800 of those 1,300 people were on. So we could answer their questions. We could feed them more recipes. We had Facebook Live sessions. And my wife and I fielded all that. And it was a roaring success. We were even on Good Morning America for a segment in January. And we're looking at doing it again this year. And if my district history is any indication, we're probably going to end up doubling that number at least this year.
Wow, that's incredible. People may be recognizing you not just from Good Morning America, but apparently you were another national recipient of an award. So would you mind talking about that a little bit?
Well, last year I was selected as PETA's sexiest vegan over 50. There was, whatever that means, sexiest vegan. There across my Facebook feed last summer, there was, do you think you're a sexy vegan or whatever? And on a lark, I filled out the form, sent in a picture, and my wife laughed and said, Doug, there's a lot of other guys out there. Don't get your hopes up. And sure enough, a month later, I get an email saying, congratulations, you're one of the 3 finalists. And there was a woman selected and a man, so there were a total of 6 finalists. And it came down to a Facebook vote, and I won. So it's sort of an unusual distinction, and every time I mention it, somebody laughs, and that's okay.
Well,
I laugh.
Well, it's an honor to have the opportunity to interview the world's sexiest vegan over 50. When you look back upon this journey, besides that, is there anything that surprised you, that you just didn't expect 10 years ago that has, changed your life or changed outlook or changed the way things look for you that you just simply weren't expecting?
Well, there's a few, some sort of humorous and some just profound, I think. The first thing is looking at my fridge or looking at my pantry, saying, when did the hippie move in? What's the tofu and the tempeh and the chickpea flour and everything. That has been such a radical shift. It's just like, it's unbelievable. And my wife and I comment on it all the time, that our life looks so different. But beyond that, truly understanding what good health is and can bring to a person. And people don't realize it because we've lived with less than average health. And I think everybody does. Somebody eats a lot of dairy and they get colds all the time. They just think, oh, I'm prone to colds all the time. Yet you cut that dairy out and all of a sudden, hey, colds aren't as bad. Inflammation, people with osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis, and it bothers me. They go plant-based and all of a sudden I don't have those aches and pains anymore. And to really, like I say, I feel better than I did in my 20s. And I do. The energy I have is just amazing. The reason I took up running is I couldn't sleep at night because I had so much energy and I needed something to burn off some of that energy. And running fit the bill.
Wow. Well, if you're able to, and it sounds like you probably do in all these things you're involved with, if you can have a conversation with somebody on day one who's trying to change it around, who's trying to, not make it all the way to heart attack land, what would you tell that person to get them kind of started on the right path?
Well, I think it's the exception more than the rule that most people can't go jump in feet first and I'm going 100% plant-based, no oil, boom. It is a gradual thing. They have to build up the recipes that they're comfortable with that satisfies them to move them along. Typically, the first thing I say, okay, let's take this a little bit at a time. First thing, cut all dairy. Just cut out dairy for this week. See how you feel. A lot of times I will refer them to the 7-Day Rescue book by Rip Esselstyn because it explains all the science in there in a very easy to digest fashion. You read the first, I think it's 101 pages, and after reading that, you understand why you shouldn't eat this, this, and this. And then you can start making those changes towards that. And then there's all the recipes in there to do that with. And, try a new recipe. Some people, okay, you don't want to try this. Just do one day a week that you're plant-based or one meal. Do a plant-based meal. Try that. Cutting back on those meat items, giving them suggestions on what to eat. That helps a lot of people because people don't know where to start. What do you mean I'm just going to eat rice? Am I just going to eat potatoes, just salads? And so many people just say that, oh, you must eat a lot of salads. No, not really. We like our salads, but we eat a lot of different things. So giving them some of those go-to recipes, we almost have a packet. Just, okay, you don't want to read the book. Here's some recipes to try. What are some of your favorite things? And we'll talk with them like, okay, what kinds of foods do you like? Do you like Mexican? Do you like stir fries? Do you like this? What are your go-to comfort foods? And you get a sense of what kind of things they like to eat. And then you can sort of guide them in a direction of recipes that might appeal to them.
That's great. If you could go back in time and have a conversation with yourself, whether it was before the first heart attack, if it was after the first heart attack, and give yourself some kind words to kind of push yourself in this direction a little sooner, what would you say?
Actually, I probably wouldn't be kind to myself. I would have, especially now that Rip's book is out, which I didn't have. I really like as you could tell, the 7-Day Rescue book. I would have taken the book, slapped myself upside the head and said, read this one. If you didn't read all the other ones, and not just flip through it, read this, and then come back and talk to me. because I think he writes in a powerful way, and it's what has shown for so many. And I really didn't think it was, I don't expect people to eat like me, 100% like me, but if they just move to a healthier version of what they're eating, along that spectrum, it's a win. And the more they get healthy, the more they'll further along. And I think, so many people have commented on the power of that 10-day jumpstart. And if they just commit and they'll see drastic changes in 7 days and 10 days. And so, for a lot of people, that's enough to carry them forward.
That's all great information. And lastly, if people are hearing your story and want to connect with you or keep up with what you have going on, what's the best way to reach out to you?
I am on Facebook, Doug Schmidt. We have our Facebook page still open, and now it's open to everybody, not just people who took the challenge. And it's called Eat Plants Love. And we sort of want to be the big tent, big umbrella people. There's a lot of plant-based groups out there that, we only do Esselstyn, or we only do McDougall, or we only do this, or you can't eat this. What do you mean you're eating honey? We don't want to, we're not a vegan group. We're a plant-based group. And it's more of a plant-based learning group. If you want recipes, we're there. If you want advice, we're there. If you want help and support, that's what we're there for.
That's great. Well, I'll include a link to that in the notes for this. And Doug, I really appreciate the time. I look forward to getting up to Rochester to dine with you and Sarah. And thanks again. I appreciate it.
We'll have to do that. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great night.
You too.